Well, another 2 weeks flashes by. Paul Brennan here in Wellington. And Martin, you're still where?
No, I'm still in Australia. Now I'm in Melbourne.
Oh, gosh, you do get around.
Yeah, working.
Oh, come on. At least you're earning something, mate.
Yeah, it's back into the whole corporate lifestyle.
Oh, dear. Well, you'll try and get out of that as soon as possible, no doubt. But anyway, there's a seat sitting here for you, Martin. Unpaid, but it's here for you. Okay, let's get into it. And we've been talking in quite a few previous programs about this imminent alliance between Air New Zealand and Singapore Airlines and what that could mean. And of course, we were talking about it while it was still being decided upon. I think we have heard now that it's going ahead. Is that correct?
Yes, it is. And Singapore will be sending an A380 to Auckland.
When does that start? Do we know?
Late October, I think.
So that will be the fourth A380 service a day into Auckland. That's pretty good for a small country.
Yes, and interesting because this gives you one stop to Europe with A380 as opposed to Dubai, or Emirates, which is a stop in Australia, then a stop in Dubai, then Europe. So this is pretty good news for the A380 fans out there.
So they must be feeling quietly confident about that. Like you say, one stop, A380 all the way not only to London but to other European cities as well. Singapore must have a lot of confidence to be sending an aircraft that big down here, surely.
Yes, well, I think Air New Zealand is going to be running a flight up to Singapore now. They're taking over one of the daily Singapore flights, and that's going to be 777-200. And then, Singapore's going to be running an A380. So an overall capacity gain, that'd be a nice way to get to Europe.
What do you think will happen pushing onward via New Zealand to South America? That's another thing we've been talking about. The 787-9s are on the way. Not too sure if they're capable on range. I think they do squeeze in there. So do you think we'll get an announcement soon to say that there'll be some sort of service through to South America to capitalise on that link?
I think once they've got the planes bedded in and they've worked out the best place to fly to, I think Auckland is Singapore Airlines or the Star Alliance's gateway to South America. Absolutely.
Right. So watch that space.
Also, Airbus in the region. Did you see the report in the Australian press about how happy the CEO of Virgin Australia was with the A350?
No, I didn't see that. Okay.
Oh, for a plane he hasn't ordered, he was raving about it.
That was Mr. Borghetti.
Mr. Borghetti himself.
So he must have been impressed by the numbers they gave him and what he saw, because they came through visiting, didn't they?
Yeah, there was even members of the company, flight crew, cabin crew, also praising the aircraft to the press. And apparently the way they've designed the interior with no central overhead lockers, it appears to be square. You know, the perception when you're sitting in it is that it's got vertical sidewalls and a flat ceiling, so you feel like you're sitting in a room, not in a tube.
Right, okay.
Seems to be going down well with the people that have been on it.
It just shows you there's always something new that can be done in the cabin. When you think they've run out of ideas, there's something new happens.
It looks that way. And another Airbus story from the region, Qantas is ditching the 767s on the Honolulu flights and they're going over to A330s.
Right. That'll be what, the 200s or the 300? I think it'd be 200s, wouldn't it?
Must be the 200s, yeah. Qantas never put winglets on their 767s.
No, they didn't, did they? No.
Yeah, no, and that was apparently a huge benefit.
Why would they not do that?
I mean, it's something I'm coming up against in my work here. They just doggedly persist with obsolete systems far longer than anybody else would. It's amazing. I mean, the project I'm involved in now, you just look at the stuff they've kept running to the point they've gone over to America and trawled computer scrapyards and bought back dozens of old, obsolete computers so they can keep their current platform running. It's just bizarre. They've got a key piece of equipment. Its fundamental operating system at the machine interface level is DOS 6.2.
Out with the DOS manual.
It's amazing. It is just amazing. And I think Qantas has run along much the same lines.
That's stunted thinking, isn't it? That doesn't get you anywhere. It might give you a false sense of economy, but in the end, it really never achieves that, does it?
Yeah, it's a very interesting way of thinking, and I think, given my experience here, it's peculiarly Australian.
There you go.
Yeah, they flog it to death.
Speaking of Asian carriers, just before I note also that Taiwan's China Airlines is announcing more flights over the summer period direct to Christchurch. I think 3 or 4 a week for a 2-month period. So that's good for the folk of Christchurch.
It is.
And I think they'll be flying A330s here.
Well, that's what you do notice. The other day I swung through Sydney man, it was chocker, full of A330s.
Yeah, big
And
seller.
I watched a really cool landing. It's Vietnam Airlines. He landed it on the rear axle of the main, undercarriage bogies.
Yeah.
And kept the front wheels off for a while.
Oh.
Then slowly settled it down and went down the runway for quite a long way, really nose high. It looked fantastic.
What, just bleeding off the energy?
Yeah, and then slowly lowered the nose and basically lowered the nose and stopped. Once the nose came down, you could turn off.
I noticed that with the Airbus A340 and A330 that it actually takes quite a time for all the gears to settle on the runway as opposed to, other types. They lower themselves sort of down, don't they?
There must be quite a lot of resistance on that bogie, the hinge.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was a bit disappointed to see on the A350 that the main leg bogie, they kind of tilt forward, which I've always said when they tilt back it looks a lot better.
Right.
Purely aesthetic. But apparently the reason they've done that, the tilting them forward, is it cuts down drag during takeoff.
Oh, okay.
For that minute or so, or 30 seconds that the wheels are out, they don't require as much energy.
I guess over 60 or 70,000 cycles, that makes a difference.
I guess, yeah.
I didn't realise that. Okay.
Yeah, I read there was a little bit of an article about it, which I thought was quite interesting.
One thing I've always wondered about, Martin, is you see the list price for aircraft advertised, and and they're expensive, no question about that. But then you read a whole lot of stuff. This airline's ordered X amount of that, and so on and so forth. And there's always speculation about how big the discount is. And some people talk of up to 50% discount depending on how big the order is. So no one really ever knows how much the individual aircraft is ever worth. And are we any closer to working that out?
Well, yeah, it's actually fascinating. There was a UBS, the Union Bank of Switzerland. They have an airline analyst, David Strauss, and he's put out some figures on discounting, which he's taken from industry. And apparently discounting on the current 737 off list is around 59%.
59, did you say?
59%, yeah.
It's under half price, yeah.
Yeah, the 777 is 54%. Even the 787 is discounted at 46%. That's very interesting. So the list price for a 777 is $269.5 million. So you knock 50% off that, it comes in quite cheap.
Yeah, it does, yeah.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's a hell of a lot of profit in these machines for the manufacturer to be able to sustain discounts to that level.
Yeah, there must be. I mean, they're knocking off a 787-9 in special cases, and I think this is where people have ordered early, right at the beginning of the program, where they can still pick up a 787-9 for $135 million and a 787-800 for as little as $115 million.
Gosh.
And he reckons that Dubai, Emirates, is getting 777s for as little as $130, $140 million, which is, that's 60% off the list price.
Which means as security for a loan against them, it's a no-brainer because even if they were second-hand and reasonably new, you'd get more than that reselling them, wouldn't you?
If you flicked it on immediately, yeah, you could probably make $5 or $6 million, yeah. Yeah.
Those discounts are available, just to the big airlines with big orders, or is that something that anyone can rock up and negotiate?
Obviously, the smaller the order, the less the discount, but it also very much depends on the phase. And, of course, as the 737 NG, what are they called?
The next gen.
The next gen, as that ramps up, anybody will be able to get a discount because they don't want the line to suffer. It's cheaper for them to offer you a massive discount than it is to produce less planes, because once they've got the sort of, the sausage stuffer rolling, the last thing you want to do is stop it, because then you have to restart it all again. The analysts say that Airbus is quite lucky on their A320 line. They don't have to discount as much. The A330 Neo, because it's cheaper anyway, they won't have to discount as much to undercut the 787. They do think you can get a nice juicy discount on a nice A380 though, if you want one.
Yeah, well, I can see why, because they're not having huge amounts of orders at the moment, are they?
No, they're not being snapped up.
Speaking of which, that order that was cancelled recently by Skymark Airways of Japan, I think they even got one built and fully painted in their colours. Then something went wrong. And it seems that Airbus have been quite unhappy with Skymark. They've come across as not too happy about that cancellation. Do we know anything more about that? What happened there?
No, I read much the same myself, and I was a bit surprised because I know when Skymark first made that order, it was very sort of suspect that they'd ever follow through. I mean, they're a discount airline in Japan.
Yeah.
What were the chances, really? What were the chances?
But it went all the
I
way
don't know.
to being assembled and painted and probably not having the cabin fitted at that stage, but a long way down the line. And they've only recently just received new A330, so they're still a customer.
Yes, but I think they're headed for that's it for Skymark. I don't think Skymark's going to be around much longer.
Right.
It's a lot of plane for a low-cost carrier and a lot of plane for any airline to absorb.
Yeah, you really have to have the network and the operation to support it, don't you, to make... First of all, make the most of the premium that it offers, and then as that comes off, to be able to fill it up with up to 800 passengers.
That was a long shot at the best of time, I think. And I don't understand why Airbus is upset about that, because, I think most people saw it coming. Unless, of course, Airbus had asked them whether that was a problem, and they said, no, it's all good, deliver them. And then they found out later that it wasn't good.
I wonder who's going to get those frames, because they're not going to go away. They exist, so I guess they'll be sold to somebody or passed on to someone.
I think I'll go to Emirates.
Yeah, why not? Able to get them for even cheaper.
Yeah, you probably would.
You mentioned Qantas and their 767s before and how they haven't put the winglets on or even done them up at all, and I think they must have about 30 or so of them, so quite a significant fleet. Air New Zealand's been busy refurbishing its, or beginning to refurbish its 777-200s. I think the first one's about ready to go, isn't it?
Yeah, it'll be coming out, I think this week, actually. They've upgraded the premium economy. You've seen the space seats, or whatever they're called, on the 300ER.
Yeah.
But it's quite opulent, but nevertheless quite tight, so-called premium economy seats. On the 200ERs, they've gone for a more traditional, looks like a nice seat.
Does that mean that they're not spending as much money on the cabin? Or?
They're not spending as much money on the cabin, but I actually think the seat might be better.
Oh, okay, interesting.
It's not as crammed and gives you a bit more space. It's basically it's Air New Zealand premium economy is like US Airlines business class was about 5 years ago, so it's not that bad at all, really.
Okay, yeah. So that's the first. I think they've got 8 of them, haven't they? 777-200ERs. So obviously they're intending on holding on to them for a bit longer yet. Otherwise, they wouldn't be spending the money.
Yeah, it looks nice. I know we've gone on and on about the blacktail before, but they've done a good job. It's got the the fern along the back sort of
it's starting to. I think it's starting to grow on people, Martin.
And this week, I think it was this week or last week, Air New Zealand ran the first commercial 787-9 service between Sydney and Auckland.
Yeah, I see that, and very good feedback from passengers, I noted.
Yeah, that would be nice to get on that.
And the spotters were out at Sydney. Well, that would be the first 9 operating into Sydney, wouldn't it?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. And I see
the first 9's operating anywhere.
And United are test flying, or about to receive their first 9 as well, I note. So we'll see a lot of 9s coming into service in the not too distant future.
They're going to do Sydney, LA in that, aren't they?
Yeah, so it's got some legs.
Air New Zealand say they're not going to do North America because theirs doesn't have the legs. I think it's because they've got 108 more people in theirs.
Yeah, right. It's a weight thing, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, it's quite a lot of people.
Okay, so it's good to be a first in that respect, I suppose.
Yeah.
First into Sydney with a 787. And the all-black one as well. And that's getting a lot of comments too. People do like that all-black livery.
It does look quite nice, I have to say.
Yeah. For those who've flown up north in Canada, Martin, I haven't done that, but I've watched a lot of videos. And I know that 1 or 2 of our old Air New Zealand planes have ended up in Canada. I think the last one being NQC, the convertible 200 that Air New Zealand operated. There seems to be a demand in the north of Canada for cargo 73s. Well, they used to fly them onto gravel strips with the gravel kit, but obviously those aircraft are getting old. They're going to have to replace them with something. I guess another 737 is the obvious thing. Now, what's that company in Canada that's become well known for freight conversions?
Kelowna Flightcraft.
That's the one. Didn't they do the Convair, the stretch of the Convair? Yeah.
They make the Super Convair, yeah.
And now they're talking about getting some newer 737s converted to freighters, aren't they?
Yeah, the old 300s.
Ah, there you go.
I guess the work would be much the same as doing a 200. I mean, the fuselage structures would probably be identical.
Yeah, pretty well. Well, there are some 300 freighters around. I mean, there's that company Airwork in New Zealand that operates them for toll. They've got 5 or 6 of them. But I think that there's not enough ground clearance for, or there's no gravel kit as such for the 300.
No, you have to keep them off the gravel. If you watch that, what was it called? Buffalo Airlines.
Yeah.
Although they flew to a lot of really rough strips, they were flying in Yukon and Alaska. On the Yukon side, there were some amazing runways out in the middle of nowhere, perfectly lit and asphalted, and I was quite surprised, actually. I also wonder if it wasn't a carryover from the Cold War, when maybe they scattered really good runways all over the place in case there was a sort of military requirement.
Yeah, well, you had the US bombers heading over there that way towards Russia, didn't you? So
Yeah.
maybe they were emergency diversions. Canada was in the thick of that. They were good allies.
They certainly were.
So we'll be seeing some of those 300s converted. They'll have no shortage of airframes. They're everywhere in the desert at the moment.
Yeah.
They'll have to get it certified, won't they, and stuff. But
Pretty simple, though, isn't it?
Should be,
take a
yeah.
big circular saw, cut a hole in the side, bolt the door into it.
yes, simple. And those airframes would be cheap, wouldn't they? They'd be going for a song.
So you're getting for next to nothing.
Martin, last program I brought up the book that's being advertised now quite heavily on New Zealand media, the true story behind the disappearance of MH370. I think it's called Good Night MH370. As I say, the advertising for that book is taking place now. I'm yet to read it, hopefully get a copy and read it soon. I'm sceptical, but we'll reserve judgment until it's been read. But in the meantime, there's been a lot of speculation about what will happen to Malaysian Airlines with 370 and, of course, MH17. And I see that the recovery of bodies is still ongoing. They've got most of them. A lot of them have been identified, but there's still some still out there in the field. So that hasn't run its course yet. But, of course, Malaysian Airlines, people have been saying, could be dealt a fatal blow with all of this. But that seems unlikely, doesn't it? Because, well, for a start, the Malaysian government owes Malaysian Airlines, and, well, they won't let an instrument of foreign policy go under, will they?
They own it now. It was partially privately owned, and they've just renationalised the whole thing. So they're going to renationalise, restructure, possibly change the name to Air Malaysia or something, and put it on a stable footing. Of course, there's also been that recent event where a Malaysian Airlines flight attendant apparently sexually harassed or sexually molested a young woman on a flight to Australia.
Oh, dear.
All bad press, yeah.
So they've renationalised the airline, so they're not prepared to let it go under, they're not prepared to let it fold. I wonder what the AirAsia X people think about that. It seems slightly unfair, perhaps.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to say too much about it. I mean, it is the flag carrier, and, you know, nationalism runs quite strong in Malaysia, so I think AirAsia X would be quite wise not to say anything about that at this point. I'm sure they'll get some concessions out of it in the long run. Their own pet airport project is something they're pushing quite strongly, so maybe they'll get that out of it.
So would it be in their culture, I don't know too much about the culture, would it be in their culture quite a loss of face situation to let Malaysia go under as a result of these tragedies and, of course, the business record it had prior to that?
More a loss of national pride. They are nationalistic, quite proud, and they always want to do better than Singapore.
Okay. That's always going to be a factor, huh?
Yeah, and that's always going to be quite difficult when it comes to airlines.
And they've got quite a big network too, and they've got A380s, and you know they're a real McCoy airline. It's a big deal if it folds. A lot of people would be without jobs. It'd leave a big hole in the tourism industry. I imagine there'd be all sorts of consequences.
Yeah, no, that's why it'll never happen. They'll keep it going. I mean, they are going to take this opportunity to restructure it, because now they have, unfortunately, have an excuse to make the hard calls they probably should have made years ago.
Right.
Good luck to them, I say.
There have been a few crashes. Let's just mention a couple of them. There was one in Tehran. I think a local version of an Antonov crashed there in a suburb of Tehran after the takeoff from the international airport there. I think everyone on board killed. Not a very good outcome.
Looks a bit messy.
We had a helicopter crash here in New Zealand over the weekend, or just before the weekend. A helicopter rolling down one of the mountains in the South Island, Mount Alta, I think it was, on a heli-skiing trip. So that was bad. One person killed, and investigations are underway.
Yeah.
We mentioned it some programs ago when the airlink between Waitanapa, that's Marsden and Hood Aerodrome in Auckland, which was being operated by Air New Zealand with Beach 1900s. That was cut a while back, but it's good news for the Waitanapa. They have it coming back again at last.
Yes, Wairarapa, Marsden to Auckland.
I believe Vincent Aviation, Peter Vincent, his company, are going to be taking it over with their Saab 340, so he'll be pleased to find some work for that on a daily basis. Yes,
the old Saab 340. I remember when I was living in the States, airports were thick with Saab 340s, especially Washington, D.C., Dallas. They were chocker. There's either Saab 340s for the little commuter lines or Jetstream J31s and 41s.
Yeah, I saw Jetstream had an undercarriage collapse somewhere in the UK, and I noticed it was still in the paint job of Origin Pacific, those ones that were sitting at Welly for ages, obviously found their way back to the UK.
I wondered about that, yeah, because it did look familiar.
Yeah. No, it had that Origin Pacific paint job on. I don't know if it'll be flying again. They had a main gear collapse. It may have caused too much damage. Who knows? But I wonder where those aircraft ended up. Just shows you they never really disappear, do they? If they're in good working order, they'll usually crop up somewhere.
Yeah. There were lots of those around as well. J31s and Saab 340s. They were everywhere at one stage.
They must have sold quite a few of them. I think American Eagle was the big operator of the Saab 340. Of course, Air Nelson operated that aircraft here, and it seems that Vincent's the only one with one left. But he'll be operating that through to Auckland. I think starts November, doesn't it?
Yes, it'll be starting in November.
So what is it, every weekday, is it?
Yeah, Monday to Friday.
Okay, now we might as well segue into our aircraft of the day. Last week we were talking about, of course, the Nomad, the GAF Nomad, to acknowledge the fact that you were in the country of origin for the GAF Nomad.
Yep.
This time we're talking the Saab 340. When this aircraft came on the scene, it would have been, what, the early to mid-80s? I think it first flew in early 80s, certified in 84, 85. They must have sold a lot of copies, Saab. A great Swedish export.
It was a great Swedish export, so they sold just under 500, I think.
Right.
Of the old Saab 340, and it was bigger than it looked. It was a 34-seater.
Yeah, I've flown in one here in NZ a lot, and yeah, they're quite big.
Hence the name.
Yes.
Yeah, and very successful, and of course that led on to the fantastic aircraft, which we'll talk about some other day, which is the Saab 2000. But I've flown on a few 340s, you kind of felt this is a solid piece of kit.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean, yeah.
Well, it actually felt very much like my car.
Your Volvo.
The old Volvo.
Yeah,
the old Volvo.
There's the pedigree, there's the Swedish thing.
Chugged along all right, about 250 knots was the cruise.
They had GE turboprops, if I remember rightly.
Yes, they did. I just thought they were a very nice-looking plane.
Yeah.
How many of them were in New Zealand? Were there a lot of them?
I think they had about 13 or 14 of them in the Air Nelson fleet. There were quite a few of them from memory. And they would have operated here for a good 20 years, so they're good, reliable machines. And I think they had an EFIS cockpit too. They were one of the first regional turboprops with an EFIS cockpit, which made them quite futuristic for the day,
They did, because sometimes you could see through the front to see what Biggles was up to, which is always nice as well. That's why I quite like flying in those little things.
Oh, is that who it is up there?
And I never had the same feeling flying in the J41 or the J31. I thought, Saab, this is going to be a good flight.
Well, the J41 was like a sort of small 340, wasn't it, in a way?
And they were smaller in every way. They were tighter, and it just wasn't as nice. Given the choice between a Saab 340 or one of those early RJs, like the Canadair, I'd rather flown a Saab 340.
One thing I noticed a lot from spotting in Wellington is in the wind is that they were very capable in windy and turbulent conditions. They handled it very well. In fact, remarkably well for the size of the aircraft. Obviously, great controllability. And I'm sure if we read what pilots had to say about them, they'd probably say that.
What I always found interesting was the degree of anhedral on the tail, or dihedral.
That's right.
They were cranked up a lot. They kind of stood there stalky on their very simple-looking undercarriage.
And they had big ailerons too. A lot of control authority there in the.
And I tell you, they used to get off the ground. We're going up now. Bang, off you went.
I imagine many of them are still in service.
Yes, Saab have been very successful. They formed a leasing company once they stopped producing them and bought as many as they could back from the operators. I think they teamed up with BAE, because Saab and BAE are very close. And the leasing company is based in the UK, and they lease them out all over the world. They're still big operators of Saab 340s, and are obviously quite happy. They must have lasted well, because they were built so nicely.
Like your Volvo.
Well, like my Volvo, exactly.
Mind you, Saab cars don't do so well these days, do they?
No, not since the late 80s, 90s. They were still classic Saabs. So once General Motors got hold of it, it all went downhill quite rapidly.
And of course, like you just mentioned, the Saab 340 was sort of like the on-ramp to the Saab 2000, which was really the ultimate version of that combination. That may as well have been a jet, really.
Yeah, that was a cracking plane, that was.
It had the same fuselage. I think it had slightly different wings. It definitely had different engines.
Man, those have different engines.
They could see, 50, was it?
Yeah, they were bigger. Yeah, 40, 48, 50. And man, that thing took off.
Right.
Because I flew in one of those in Switzerland, and you really push you back in your seat, like quite forcefully.
They probably were one of the bigger operators. That would have been Crossair, right?
Crossair, yeah, before they ended up becoming Swissair, which is kind of weird.
Did many go to the States? You'd think that quite a few would follow the 340, but I think American Eagle stuck with the 340, didn't they?
Yeah, America's funny like that. Hey, the moment they thought they could get away with it, they upscaled everything to jet.
Yeah.
I'm not sure it always made sense. Well, I'm pretty sure.
Well, they went to ATR, didn't they? American Eagle, in quite a big way.
For the island hoppers and all of that, yeah. The Saab 2000, actually, what did I say, 48? No, I think it was 58.
Right.
And that got along at 500 miles an hour.
Wow. Well, that's a rocket ship, all right. That is almost a jet, like I say.
Yeah, that was fast.
And most of them would probably still be operating, I would imagine, as well.
They didn't make many. They made much less than 100.
Right.
Yeah, I've actually got a book about the Saab 2000 because it was like the big chance it never really took off. It came out just at the wrong time. It was basically killed by the RJs. But if people had had their thinking hats on, you would never have bought a Canadair regional jet instead of the Saab 2000.
Most of those RJs are out of service now.
Yeah, they're all in the desert.
Anything under 50 seats, they say, is not viable anymore.
Yeah. In America, turboprops of about this size aren't selling anyway because they were traditionally used on trips of sort of 150 to 250 miles and sort of very short hops. But the security and all they're going to the airport now means it's actually easier to drive.
So the Saab 340 is the aircraft of the day on our aviation podcast.
And I'm a fan.
I'm a fan as well, though it looks like really the only chance to get to fly one of those in this part of the world now. Though I think they're still operated by, is it Kendall Airlines over in Australia? I think they had them. I don't know if they've still got them.
And you see them at, what's the airport called on the way in from Tullamarine? Is it Essendon?
Essendon, yeah.
Yeah, it's quite a few, but well, not quite a few. There's a couple parked up there, and there's also a very nice plane, the Dornier, what's it, 328? Not jet, the propeller one, yeah.
Oh, wow, one there. Okay, well, so still a few opportunities over there to fly one, but if you want to fly one in New Zealand, Saab 340, it sounds like you'll have to head over to the Wairarapa and pick up the Vincent Aviation flight up to Auckland. You'll get to fly on the Saab 340.
Yeah, very pleasant flight.
All right, well, there's our program gone again, and you need to get back and save the Australians from whatever you're saving them from. Yeah, okay, themselves. And we'll be back in a couple of weeks.
All right, then.
All right, in the meantime, it's Paul Brennan in Wellington and
Martin Noakes in Toorak,
which is near Melbourne.
3 metro stops from Melbourne. It is Melbourne.
And we'll see you around soon, all right?
All right, then.